Richard Chase, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento, was born on May 23, 1950 in California. As a child, he displayed troubling signs of mental instability, showing signs of cruelty to animals. As Richard Chase grew older, his mental deteriorated further. He became convinced that his body was falling apart and that he needed to consume blood to survive. In 76, he was institutionalized after injecting rabbit's blood into his veins. The staff nicknamed him Dracula after he broke the necks of 2 birds he caught through the hospital window and drank their blood. In 77, Richard Chase's killing spree began. Over the course of a month, he murdered 6 people, including men, women, and even children. His crimes were characterized by the brutality, which Chase often mutilated his victims, engaging in necrophilia, cannibalism, and drinking their blood. It was clear that he was driven by an intense delusion and a deep-seated desire to consume blood. This made him an incredibly dangerous individual. Finally, on January 27, 1978, Richard Chase was apprehended by the police. Chase's defense attorney argued that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. The court ultimately found Richard Chase guilty of multiple counts of murder. He was sentenced to death, but his life was cut short when he died by suicide in his prison cell in 1980. Dennis Rader, aka the BTK Killer, was born on March 9, 1945 in Kansas. He was actively involved in his church and community. However, a dark secret was lurking. Between 74 and 91, he committed a series of heinous acts. He targeted 10 innocent victims, both men and women, ranging in age from 9 to 62. He would break into his victims' homes, bind them with rope or other materials, and strangle them to death. Rader's crimes earned him the nickname BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Rader managed to evade capture for decades. However, his arrogance and desire for attention ultimately led to his downfall. In 2004, Rader sent a floppy disk to the TV station, believing that it couldn't be traced back to him. However, technology had advanced and we were able to recover metadata from the disk. On February 25, 2005, Dennis was arrested and subsequently confessed to his crimes. While searching his property, authorities found his treasure trove of trophies, copies of letters he sent police, and hundreds of photographs. Some were of the people he murdered, and others were of himself in bondage, hanging from trees in the clothes of the women he killed and concealing his face with masks. Rader was convicted of 10 counts of first-degree murder and is currently serving multiple life sentences. Herbert Mullen was born on April 18, 1947 in California. His childhood was marked by tragic events, including the accidental death of his younger brother and a car accident that killed his friend one summer. Mullen became obsessed with reincarnation as well as dark and apocalyptic ideas, often discussing his visions of an impending catastrophe. During his teenage years, Mullen's mental health deteriorated further, experiencing hallucinations. These delusions intensified as he grew older, leading him to seek solace in drugs like LSD. In 72, he believed that by sacrificing innocent lives, he could prevent a huge earthquake that was imminent. Driven by his delusions, Mullen embarked on a terrifying killing spree. Over just 4 months, Mullen took the lives of 13 innocent people, including a vagrant, a priest, and even 4 teenagers camped out in the woods. His victims were chosen randomly, often in a haphazard and senseless manner. Mullen's spree of violence came to an end when he was apprehended in February 1973. He openly confessed to his murders, displaying a disturbing lack of remorse. The jury rejected his insanity defense and found him guilty of multiple counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Mullen died on August 18, 2022 at age 75. Dorothea Puente, aka the DeathHouse Landlady, was born on January 9, 1929 in California. She grew up in a troubled household and had a turbulent childhood. As she grew older, Dorothea developed a knack for manipulating others and running scams, which eventually led her down a dark path. By the late 70s, after some failed marriages, Puente started operating a boarding house in Sacramento. On the surface, it seemed like a caring and safe environment for the elderly and mentally ill, assisting them to sign up to receive Social Security benefits. Over the years, several of Puente's tenants mysteriously disappeared, and their loved ones were left searching for answers. It wasn't until a social worker in November 1988 became suspicious of the mounting number of deaths associated with Puente's boarding house that the truth began to unravel. Authorities launched an investigation into Puente and her house. Upon the search, investigators discovered multiple bodies buried in the yard. Puente had been killing her tenants and hired convicts to dig holes in her yard for years, all while collecting their Social Security benefits. The media dubbed her the DeathHouse Landlady, and the trial that followed captivated the public. In 93, Dorothea Puente was found guilty of 3 out of the 9 murders and sentenced to life in prison. Juana Barraza, aka La MataViejitas, the old lady killer, was born on December 27, 1957 in Hidalgo, Mexico. She had a troubled childhood with an alcoholic mother who once even traded her for 3 beers to a man who repeatedly sexually abused her in his care. Prior to her arrest, Barraza was a professional wrestler under the ring name of La Dama del Silencio, the Lady of Silence. She had a strong interest in lucha libre. Barraza's crimes took place between the late 90s and early 2000s. All of her victims were women aged 60 or over. She bludgeoned or strangled them before robbing them. It was discovered that Juana's deep-seated resentment towards her mother played a significant role in her crimes. She targeted elderly women who resembled her abusive mother, and by killing them, she sought revenge for the suffering she endured during her childhood. Eventually, a breakthrough came when Juana Barraza was caught red-handed at the scene of a crime. She was finally apprehended in 2006. Barraza's trial started in spring of 2008, the prosecution alleging she had been responsible for as many as 40 deaths. On March 31st, she was found guilty on 16 charges of murder. She was sentenced to 759 years in prison. Edmund Kemper, aka the CoEd Killer, was born on December 18, 1948 in California. He suffered constant emotional abuse from his mother, who belittled him and reinforced feelings of resentment and anger. As Kemper grew old, his disturbing fantasies and fixation on death intensified. In '64, at the age of 15, he murdered both his grandparents. Kemper was sentenced to a max security mental institution for the criminally insane. At age 21, he convinced the parole board of his rehabilitation and was set free. Between May 72 and April 73, Kemper killed 8 more people, all women. The first 6, he would pick up hitchhiking students and take them to isolated areas where he would shoot, stab, or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home, where he decapitated them, performed necrophilia, and then dismembered them. Kemper has stated in interviews that he would search for victims after having arguments with his mother. His last 2 murders would be his own mother, which he decapitated and humiliated the head till he finally bashed it in, and then his mother's friend. He turned himself in, confessing all his crimes. During his trial, Kemper was deemed legally sane and was convicted of 8 counts of first-degree murder. He requested death penalty, but was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Genene Jones, aka the Angel of Death, began her career as a licensed vocational nurse in San Antonio, Texas, working in pediatric clinics and hospitals. No one could have imagined the horrors she would unleash. In a pediatric intensive care unit, a statistically improbable number of children died under her care. Because the hospital feared being sued, it simply asked all of its LVNs, including Jones, to resign. She then took a position at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville, Texas. It was here that she was charged with poisoning 6 kids. During the 70s and 80s, Genene's crimes involved the deliberate administration of toxic substances to helpless infants and children under her care. She injected them with overdoses of medications like heparin and digoxin, causing cardiac arrests and ultimately leading to the loss of up to 60 innocent lives. Genene's reign of terror went undetected for years, as many deaths were initially attributed to natural causes. Eventually, Jones was apprehended and brought into trial in the late 80s. Proving intent and establishing the exact number of victims proved to be a challenging task. She was only convicted for 1 count of murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. Nanny Doors, aka Giggling Granny, was born on November 4, 1905 in Alabama. Nanny's life took a dark turn when she was just a teen with the death of her first love. Nanny married at the age of 16, hoping to find love and happiness. 2 out of their 4 children died due to suspected food poisoning. Her first marriage ended in divorce. She got married again in 1928. This one lasted 16 years. In 43, her daughter witnessed her kill her youngest grandchild with a hat pin shortly after birth. In 45, she suffocated her oldest grandchild after an argument with her daughter. Later that year, she put rat poison in her husband's whiskey after he got handsy with her, and he died that evening. Her third husband died of what was said to be heart failure. In 53, during her 4th marriage, Nanny poisoned her own mother and her new husband. She also poisoned her 5th husband. This death alerted his doctor, who ordered an autopsy which revealed a huge amount of arsenic in his system. Nanny was promptly arrested. She confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, her mother, her sister, her grandson, and her mother-in-law. Her motive? To collect insurance money and start afresh with the new love interest. On May 17, 1955, Nanny Doors was sentenced to life in prison. Fred West was born on September 29, 1941 in Herefordshire, England. His childhood was marked by several nasty things, ranging from assault to even impregnating his younger sister. His first marriage was full with infidelity, some illegitimate children, and abuse of all sorts. His first murder was in the late 60s, one of his mistresses. He dismembered her body and even cut out the unborn baby. He met his second wife, Rose, while she was 15. Rose murdered one of his children while Fred was locked up for a short while. Shortly after his release, he murdered his first wife, extensively dismembering her body. On January of 72, they got married. Both individuals had murderous and abusive tendencies. Rose began to work as a prostitute, operating from an upstairs room in their home. Despite all the debauchery in the house, Fred continued to mistreat his daughters. His oldest went missing in the late 80s, and in the early 90s, another of his daughters expressed to one of her friends on how her father had been sodomizing her. This led to the police being called. Fred confessed to killing his daughter and to 9 more murders, all women, 6 bodies being buried beneath the house. They both was arrested in 94, the pair believed to have murdered 12 to 13 people. In January 95, Fred hung himself awaiting trial. Rose was sentenced to life. Bobby Joe Long was born on October 14, 1953 in West Virginia. Bobby had a dysfunctional relationship with his mother. He slept in her bed until he was a teenager and resented her multiple boyfriends she brought with her when returning home late night from work. As a teen, he displayed a disturbing fascination with voyeurism and burglary, eventually leading to his first arrest in 74. Bobby's behavior escalated when he moved to Florida in the late 70s. There, he committed at least 50 rapes, earning him the moniker the classified ad rapist due to his method of selecting victims. These assaults were merely a prelude to his most sinister acts. In 84, Bobby embarked on a killing spree of at least 10 women that would haunt Tampa Bay for the year. His targets were often prostitutes or those involved in sex work. He used various methods to subdue and control his victims, employing torture, manipulation, and psychological torment to assert his dominance over them. Eventually, Bobby's criminal activities caught up with him. A survivor of one of his attacks provided the police with a detailed description leading to his identification and arrest in November of 84. Bobby was sentenced to death for 2 of the 10 murders he was suspected of committing. He was executed by lethal injection on May 23, 2019.